Hi, welcome back to now my July reads of 2025. I'm just going to get right into it, starting with The Stranger by Albert Camus. I borrowed it at the library, and the author itself really interested me, so I wanted to try one. All I can say is do not let anyone tell you that the old days were puritanical. This book debunks that heavily. Honestly, some of the verbiage used was very dated, but I feel like as I have read many classics already and heard others talk about classics, the this book's dated verbiage is, I guess, more palatable, even though that's not really the word, but it's the way he's using misogyny is through the lens of you seeing it. However, it at times can be a bit like, oh, okay. But overall, it was really a very interesting book. I had yet to really dive into like absurd fiction, things like that. And this is what that book falls under. I would definitely say that the first part is more of the like build up. So you're kind of like going through a day to day in this man's life. And then the second part is kind of where the absurdity comes in and just really a depressing view of how society can be. And it's definitely an interesting read, especially for a classic of that time frame. The next book I read was Deep In by Ali Hazelwood. So for me, I've read nearly all of Allie's books. I think other than Mate that's about to come out, I only have two more left of hers to read before I'm just completely caught up in all of her novels. So for me, knowing that, this was one of the more enjoyable reads that I have read of Allie Hazelwood's novels. The story structure, the characters, even the pacing, it all worked. And, for a book that this thick, this is probably like her thicker, if not like second thick, because I know like Love theoretically is pretty thick too. So for her to keep a good pace through like a large romance novel like that was, for me, very impressive. I also am really, really happy that some of these books are starting to shy away from the third act breakup stuff. Because that's like the one thing with Allie Hazelwood that just drives me up the wall is a lot of her books have that third act breakup very close to the end, and it tanks the story for me. I would even say that's probably one of like my top 3 of her writings at this point. Another book I read was The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. If you want cozy vibes, because I'm learning through other cozy vibe books that I've read, it's not a very interesting for me. I feel like it just kind of falls flat after a while, but that's very much what that is. It's cozy. It gives Hallmark. If you are a Hallmark girly, you're going to like that book. For me though, you could definitely see like glaring plot holes, pacing issues. And another thing too was the very few problems that make its way into the story to be, I guess more than the cozy vibe. They're so quickly fixed and wrapped up that it makes me bored. I'm not saying that it would be boring for everyone if that's your preference of reading. I just felt like I wanted more. And also again, another fairly thick book for what it is, you finally get to kind of the end where things should start be wrapping up. And I found myself noticing it was too quickly paced. Like the book itself was just not getting wrapped up well because there was still like plot holes that don't get really fixed. And it was very rushed. I will say though, despite all that, you kind of really stick with the book for like the whimsical aspect of it. And that I did like. Another book I read was Hocus Pocus and the all new sequel that comes in with it. 2 books in one. When you read the Hocus Pocus, the first story, it is basically verbatim of the movie. And because of that, I feel like when you're reading the first portion, you're kind of bored because if you've seen the movie, it's right there. It's right there in the words, and it kind of so hardcore falls on with the movie. You're just kind of a little bored, honestly, because it is written very much for kids. So I wasn't big on that. But when I got to the sequel, I will say the sequel was cute, but it's very juvenile. Like, you can tell throughout that whole book, they definitely had kind of like a teenager in mind, maybe even a preteen to read it. And I'm well past that. So cute. Yes, I will be giving it to my neighbor's daughter. But I kind of feel like unless you're young, it's going to kind of fall flat a little bit. I also read, I have a whole stack over here. Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood as well. I feel like this year has basically been like my Ali Hazelwood year. I've read so many of her books. At this point, with how many I have read, you know, you can definitely, like I said, with Deep In, you see her style, you see like how she writes, but this one was really weak for me. I feel like Love on the Brain was incredibly weak because, for one, all of her stuff will be STEM. That's fine. It's an interesting, like, setting. My issue, though, is you want me to realistically believe that these are, you know, PhD candidates, doctoral holders, etc., and they speak so juvenile as if this is high school. And it really pulled me out of the story to be like, wait, are these not, like, incredibly, like, older, first of all, but also I kind of feel like someone past the age of 20 would not speak the way that they are speaking. So it really pulled me out of it. And another thing too that I noticed, my first book of hers was The Love Hypothesis. This feels almost like a rebrand of The Love Hypothesis. It just, a couple different tropes kind of moved around. So that just really made it a really, really weak novel for me of hers. And not that it was bad, just for me, it was just weak. My next one is Better Than Fiction by Alexa Martin. So it's a very cute and straightforward romance, but kind of like with the Spellshop, it's very Hallmark vibes. I will say a lot of books really fail with like your side characters and things like that. And I feel like that book, to say something good about it really brings out like, your side characters to the point that they do overshine the main couple. Again, I will never be an insta-love person. I need to start looking up these romances and seeing if it's insta-love because it really drags the story for me. And this had it. And the issue for me was with the insta-love. It went from like flirting, which is fine, to like 100 serious romance very, very quickly. And not only did it dull the story for me, it wasn't realistic. I also, from the library when I got The Stranger, also got The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Ose Utomi. I have a few, like, highly recommended books this month. This is one of them. It is smaller. I'll have the photo, but you won't be able to see it. I don't even think it's 200 pages. So very short read, but in that short read, I did not put that book down the day that I read it until it was finished. It was incredible. The writing is gorgeous. The story itself is, a good story, like on paper, like as fiction, but the thoughtfulness in it, the way that it makes you really think, and it is part of a series. I will be getting the next one very, very soon. The next book that I read was Sea Change by Gina Chung. I'm going to tell you right now, cats and octopuses, octopi, whatever we're calling them, these guys. You put it on a cover, you put it in a book, I'm reading it. The thing with that book that I really liked was not only the multifaceted storytelling, but its depth with emotion. You truly feel during the read, you can feel what is being conveyed because you felt it. You have felt that sadness. You have felt the depression. You have felt so many things that she's going through and endured and things like that. So when you're reading it, the expression of it, you really relate to it, and I think that that's what really pulls you into that story specifically, is just the way you can relate. Also, like I said, anything with an octopus, yeah. Let's see here. I also read Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. I have seen so many people wreck this book, but for me, the point of view of the child, because that's what you're going to read, is the child's point of view throughout this book. It is so unrealistic that it kind of just brings you out of the story, because this child is supposed to be like incredibly young. The tonality and things like that, I think she's only like between like 5 and 7, very, very young. So in that, your mindset, it's a very young child, and then the on paper expressions of the book, and to like convey your story, that's not like a 5 to 7 year old. At times, yes, but I feel like the author, when they needed to express certain things, it overlaps the fact that we're still in a child's mind, like their point of view, and it goes into more like adult aspects that I don't see a small child like that having. So I think that pulls you out, because for me, the whole point is supposed to be like, oh my gosh, we're getting a kid's view of something haunty, and it didn't work for me. Okay, a graphic novel that I read as well this month was They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. I try to read a lot of nonfiction. I feel like that's like imperative. If you're reading fiction, you need to also be reading nonfiction. This is one of the most powerful stories of someone's childhood, life, whatever you may be, for me, because not only are you getting his account, but this is done in a graphic novelization. So you're getting photography with the story, and it's powerful in the way that he goes on after very horrifying things in his childhood, in an internment camp. He then goes on as an adult to do so many like impactful things, for not only his community, but just for, people in general. He's very proactive, and to see him come out of something like that and just always want to do good for others and, his family and himself, that was a very impactful story, and I highly recommend people read that. Another book was Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookhouse by Bo-Reum. This is, once again, a very pretty cover. I love it so much. But I will say, for me, it had a great start. I was devouring it until about the halfway point. Again, it is a cozy story, but by the halfway point, it's already like a short book, but I noticed myself really like pushing myself to finish and rushing myself, because it really kind of fell flat a bit towards the end. But overall, I do think it was a nice story, a cozy story. I feel like that is something you would read when you just want to slow down and just walk yourself through like a soft, gentle book. I also read Strega by Johanne, Lykke, Holm. I'll put this over here. I have a big list. It's probably one of the most beautifully written books. I find myself oftentimes with fiction really trying to pay attention to an author's voice, their style, things like that. And Johanne's writing voice is so poetic, honestly. I mean, that's really the only word to describe it. It's not a poetry book, but her novelizations are so just lyrically written. It was very, very beautifully written. And I will say, I'm not a mystery person. I'm not big on thrillers. I get really annoyed when horrors books are, or thriller books are miscategorized as horror. That has like a mystery element to it. And I found myself not only enjoying it, but really pulled into the story. Another book I read was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer. Okay, so it would have truly been a 5-star read for me. However, the climax, I guess, like, not even just the climax, but like probably like a little bit before too, started like really getting rushed in We Used to Live Here, and I just feel like it could have been fleshed out a lot more, and that would have made it a 5-star for me, because you get so much of a story, and it's very atmospheric. Very few books really give me that weight of like horror element and just like the atmospheric of dread almost. This book does that. But that last bit to like the end, just, it felt rushed. Not only rushed, but it just felt like, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe like they weren't sure exactly what they wanted to convey, and when they finally finished the book, it just didn't work for me. Also read Looking for Love in All the Haunted Places by Clare Kann. On paper, I really was excited for that book. Like, ghost hunting, ghosts, things like that. A woman who can, like, feel, and not necessarily psychic, but, like, through emotions can, like, see a person, right? So I wanted to like it a lot because it's very much in tune with what I like. However, despite all that, there was, first of all, no reason for that to be over 400 pages. It really stalls itself out with the length. I think a really good edit and pulling a lot of that off of that would have made it a more solid book. But instead, it goes so long. It really goes in circles or really gives nothing, to the point that even the romance fizzles. And so it's just kind of one of those books that by the end of it, it leaves you just unsatisfied and wanting so much more out of it. And that was really tragic in a book that I feel like the story would have impacted me more with, like, the tropes that I like, with like ghosts or haunted things or things like that. Speaking of another kind of thing, witches. Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. Now, of course, and I'm sure you can see it, that's the most Raylo coded book yet. And yeah, if it's Raylo coded, I'm going to consume it. And I will say I was pleasantly surprised by that one. It was a cute and funny story, which, I'm down for time to time. But for me, it was the chemistry of the two characters, along with just really being able to enjoy it. It really adds, like, comedy relief, things like that. I will say, if you're not someone because I get this way too, if you're someone who really does not like predictability, that's an extremely predictable book. All of the quote unquote like bad problems or issues, you can see a mile away how it's going, what's going on. I called the ending like fourth of the way in, but sometimes books like that, when they have like a good structure and a fun time along the way, it's not as bad. Okay, another thing I read was She Is a Haunting by Tran. Yes. Okay. Beautiful cover, of course. But my thing is with Trang is a gorgeous author as well. She conveys things that are beautiful. However, that book is way out of my age range. Way, way, way out of my age range. And I think that's what made it such a middle-of-the-road book for me, is beautiful storytelling, a really interesting idea. But for me, it just really... I think because I'm not the target audience that's aimed for, it just was very middle of the road for me, and it was okay. Again, that's another book I'm going to give to a neighbor. I think, again, a high recommendation. I listened to it. Educated by Tara Westover. It was incredible. It hits close to home as someone from, like, the South, where you can really, at least for me, understand what she's saying, expressing with religious zealotry. And I too was homeschooled, and a lot of the things she says rings very true in a devastating way. And I will recommend that book all day, every day to anyone who needs like a nonfiction book at this point, because that was just a really sad, devastating story, but it was just so beautifully written, and to see what she overcame is just amazing. First Love, Take Two by Sajni Patel. Listen, it's a romance, obviously. I'm going to say right now, I try to read some romances that sound interesting, but it's definitely not in my preference. That's a 5-star read. that author's writing style is amazing. It's one of the best romances I've read, if not ever, at least in a long time. It's amazing, and I am eager to read anything that author writes. It's beautiful. Another book I read was Haunted Ever After by Jen DeLuca. Again, like I said, you throw in ghosts, anything like that, a haunted house, I'm going to probably pick it up. My problem with that is, again, it's another predictable story, but, okay, I had to write it down to express it properly, but I will say I didn't, first of all, feel the chemistry of the two characters until, like, quite a bit into the book, when they were, like, way past, like, coupling, but my issue, too, is, there is, like, a fight scene in this book. Again, I try not to do, like, spoilers, but there's, like, a fight scene in this book between the two. Not only the talk, but the topic as well, and the way they go about not only doing said topic, but just even the way they, like, fix the fight. For me, I don't think it was, like, a very good way to go around that topic, and I don't want to say the topic because I feel like it would be a spoiler. But, like, even with the quote unquote fight being brought on supernaturally, I just feel like it didn't work for me. I didn't like that aspect of it, despite it being a decent, romance book. I also read Something in the Walls by Daisy Pearce. Okay, first of all, once again, it's a thriller categorized as horror. There was basically no horror in that book. And I stuck with it because so many people recommend that novel. And I was like, let's try and stick through it, because I have DNF'd other books because of this. And I'm like, no, let's just see if there is horror at the end or something. I should have DNF'd it when I felt annoyed by it, because I get to the end and I was like, it's not worth it. But a book that I also am very happy I finally got to was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I have wanted to read this, and I have the other two on my shelf. So I have the whole series, and I plan to continue it, like, basically immediately. Will say this about that book. I read other R.F. Kuang books. It was Yellowface and Babel. Both of those are good books. They just, for me, maybe it's just not the topic, the style. Like with Babel, I feel like it was just overexpressed. It was great ideology and book, don't get me wrong, but just overexpression, as if the reader is dumb, and that really bogs it for me. The Poppy War was incredible. Again, probably one of the favorites. The thing with The Poppy War, though, is it held my attention through over 500 pages. And again, autism, ADHD, that's really hard to do. So for something that large to not only keep my attention and make me want more of the story, because there's two more and they are chunky books too, that alone makes it me wreck it. I will say, though, anyone who hasn't read that yet, because I know it's been out a while, check the content warnings, because there are parts of the book that are quite graphic, and I know some people might, get a little upset by that. So I will always say content warning on that. I'm going to start my DNFs first with Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. Again, this is one of those books categorized as horror, and it's very clearly more on the thriller side. Now, don't get me wrong, the idea was really cool. I don't care about cold case stories. It's one thing that just really bores me, like, as the reader. And on top of it, the pacing of that book was so incredibly slow. I sat it. I remember before DNFing it, I had to sit it down, I think, to cook or something. And when I went to get it back again, I had no interest to continue. Another was Hot Hex Boyfriend by Carly Bloom. Okay, so my issue, first of all, with that was, and I looked it up, despite that being published in 2024, and yes, I know someone could have wrote a book long before then, but I feel like if you're publishing it in a certain decade, you should at least maybe re-edit so that it doesn't already sound dated in 2024. That reads like a book from the 90s, early 2000s at best. It was dated verbiage, it was cringy, and it tried so hard to be comedic with those things. I absolutely could not continue. I don't like it. I don't like any book that makes me just like cringe every time I'm reading it. Which is sad because like the idea is cute, like, but I just, no. And speaking again of cringy books, this is another one. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, Sarah Hawley. Again, I can't do cringe, and the literal paragraph that I stopped on was one of the most, and again, I read some odd romances. The paragraph I stopped on was so cringe. I was just like, no, thank you, I'm good. My next one is The Daughters of Madurai by Rajashree Vara. This author writes beautifully. It's a beautiful cover. My issue with it, and it's why I DNF'd it, it wasn't necessarily the story. It was that the story was so heavily focusing on motherhood, children, things like that. I'm not someone who wants to read that. It just, for me, is not a topic that I want to handle right now in my stage of life. So I DNF'd that. Now, if I ever go back to it, that's one thing. But for now, I think this would kind of be very much categorized like a soft DNF. Because it's, nothing was inherently bad. It's just the motherhood conversation, the children, just so much of it was focusing on that. And it just was not something I'm ready to really just like dive into. The Handyman Method by Nick Cutter and Andrew F. Sullivan. Okay. I've read another Nick Cutter book before, and I rated it pretty low. This is the type of horror that drives me up the wall. Now, yes, there's like extreme horror, splatterpunk, things like that. If I know what I'm getting into, that's like one thing, right? My issue at the end of the day is that specific book is leaning so hard on like animal, like cruelty, basically. And I don't want to read that. I just don't. It's not something that I want to read. It's not something that I want to deal with. And that was that. The next one was The Ghost Cat by Alex Howard. Again, like I've always said, if it's got a cat, I'm going to get it. My issue with that is just, it was so boring. I couldn't get invested at all. It was truly that boring. Now, someone told me to get this. It's How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang. Okay. Again, this is one of those, like, how do I dance around the spoilers, right? Okay. So, like I said, I picked it up and all that. This is not a realistic, even for a fictional, like, world, idea for, like, romance, things like that. Because the way that they express how the two characters, like, know each other and all that before it's, like, a time jump to, like, the present of the story, I have no interest. If that's how they're trying to start the romance, there's no way. Another is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Okay, that's my second book and of the author, and it's also the second book I've DNF'd by the author. I don't think I will pick up any more of V.E. Schwab's books because her style of storytelling is not something I personally enjoy. The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I read another book of hers, and it was pretty good. This one I just DNF'd because not only was it predictable, but, like, I just had no real want to continue because chapter after chapter after chapter was falling flat. And I got bored, and the ideas were there, but I was bored and I didn't want to continue. And it was the same with Remedial Magic. And not only was this just not an interesting book, but by chapter 3, we have insta-love. And it's not even just like, oh, I really care. No, this was like way too much, I couldn't do it. Speaking of cringy, once again, Truly, Madly, Deeply by Alexandria Bellefleur. Again, it's too cringe. It has an insufferable main character, and Another thing too is it reminded me a lot of First Time Caller by B.K. Borson, and I wish I had DNF'd that. So I cut my losses on that one. I also attempted The Deadening by Nicholas Billardis. Nothing about this was good or interesting enough for me to keep reading. So I, again, cut my losses. The idea sounded really cool, but I just, once, their storytelling style was not something I was enjoying. And then my last read of July was The Rainfall Market by Hyunam-Dong. Again, I got suckered into this. This is such a gorgeous cover. But I was like nearly halfway into that book, and I don't think it's 200 pages. And I was not invested. I noticed I was kind of like zoning out while reading, things like that. And so I just DNF'd it. Just, I have learned for myself, if I'm zoning out, not paying attention, then I'm like, wait, what happened? And it's a DNF time. Okay, so here's where I totally somehow forgot that I also DNF'd Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner and The Jasad Air by Sarah Hashem. So those are all my reads for July, and I will see you again in August.